Here we are looking at the integumentary system in class. I wrote out the various layers and named them, and now I want to show you the pictures. So skin and appendages. Look how busy this figure is. This is supposed to be a drawing of a cube cut out of skin. So what we would see is an epidermis superficially, and then the dermis makes up most of the skin, with a hypodermis deep to that. We're only seeing part of the hypodermis and the adipose tissue that make it up. We also see things like very, very prominent hair follicles. We see receptors for touch, other receptors. We see a gland. This would be a sweat gland. All those things you might expect to find in skin, and some of them are common. Like it'll be easy to find under histology everything associated with a hair follicle. It'll be easy to find sweat glands. It will not be easy to find cell surface receptors or nerves like this. They're small and they're not common enough that a random slice through skin will go through one. So there's a lot to see in skin, and let's get into it. Epidermis, dermis. Another thing to point out is this is thick skin, and most of what you're seeing here is keratinized dead cells. So the cells that are growing, mostly stratum spinosum, would be this red here. So let's see. Epidermis, I told you the stratum basale has the stem cells that make the skin cells, which are known as keratinocytes. And they because they keep getting made here, they get pushed superficially. And as they move superficially, they age, and eventually they move towards a process of keratinization. So they're thickly attached to each other, and they fill up with some lubricating oils and things like that, so that they'll be able to move even though they're dead cells. So we get a strong layer of dead skin. And in thick skin, it has all 5 layers: stratum basale, stratum spinosum, stratum granulosum would be this dark layer where granules of keratin are forming, and then stratum lucidum would be this translucent layer where we don't see many features at all, and then stratum corneum would be the superficial one. There's a little about keratinocytes. These are the main cells you'd find in skin. They make up most of skin. The way they are drawn here is kind of interesting. They have little lines between them, and those would be desmosomes. They're trying to show you that each skin cell is tightly attached to all the skin cells around it. There would be other cells. In the stratum basale, you might have a melanocyte, which would make melanin pigment. That's what makes skin dark. It would make a light-skinned person, the more melanin they would have, the darker they would be. And so someone with very dark skin has a lot of melanin. So those would be melanocytes. Slide about that. Merkel cells are a type of sensory receptors, and they give us part of the sense of touch. And then there are special immune cells, dendritic cells. These would be patrolling the stratum basale, or probably just deep to the stratum spinosum. And their job is to collect anything they can, and then they will go to a lymph node. They will travel through the body to the nearest lymph node, and they will show whatever they have found to adaptive immune cells. And the adaptive immune cells use that as their way of seeing what is going on in the body. So this goes through the layers of skin. Here's a special stain for desmosomes that can show can show them bridging the cells. And what you're seeing part of the desmosome. You're seeing the proteins that reach out and grab the proteins from the neighboring cell. You're not seeing the plates inside the cell or the fibers inside the cell that hold the plates in place. So epidermal layers, there we go. And I mentioned thick skin and thin skin. One of the differences would be stratum lucidum would only appear in thick skin. There are a lot of other differences that come about because thin skin has hair and thick skin doesn't. So a lot of the accessory structures you'll learn about are associated with hair follicles. The dermis we didn't talk about much, but if we're zoomed out this far, this is a very zoomed out picture. We can't see individual cells in the epithelium, in the epidermis. So what can we see? Well, we can see lots of adipose tissue in the hypodermis. We can see dermal papillae, where the dermis projects up into the epidermis and displaces it. This is where fingerprints come from. These ridges come from the dermal papillae, affecting how thick the skin is and how far out it projects. But also, all this light pink stuff you might see in the dermis is, well, you tell me, what type of thick, strong fiber would that be? Yes, it would be collagen fibers, thick, randomly oriented collagen fibers. Other things you'd see would be blood vessels. These are blood vessels, very large blood vessels, relatively speaking. And much smaller blood vessels up here in the papillary layer. So up here would be the papillary layer of the dermis, and down here would be the reticular layer. So let's see, papillary, and the right. So the papillary layer, if we could see this up close, would be a jumble of areolar connective tissue. And kind of at the border between the papillary and reticular layer, you might see these light-colored structures, and that is a network of blood vessels that basically the blood supply feeds that network, and that network feeds the little capillaries that support the epidermis. Let's see, papillary. Yeah, and that network of blood vessels is the subpapillary plexus. Papillary, the epidermal ridges. You can just look at that, because these are just your slides. You can look through them. I just want to make sure I'm pointing out the important things. And the deep to the dermis is a network of blood vessels that the body supplies, and they then supply everything superficial to them. That is the dermal or cutaneous plexus. So those would be big, like what I'm calling big blood vessels. And I call them that because we can see them and clearly recognize them as blood vessels. They're easy to see. The smaller blood vessels, like capillaries, are not much bigger than a cell. They're not much thicker than a cell. So they're hard to identify under histology. Okay, so those were the layers of skin. And make sure you are memorizing those layers and know what kind of tissue they are. Make sure you know thick skin versus thin skin. and I will come back in the next video to talk about the appendages of skin.